We just completed a 12-team half PPR mock draft with our listeners. We'll talk about it right now on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Welcome, everybody, to the show. A lot to discuss from this mock draft. The whole thing was on a podcast, about an hour and 6 minutes. Please check it out, the Fantasy Football Today feed. I'm Adam Azer with Jamey Eisenberg. I had the first pick. Jamey had the 11th pick. And in between us, 10 listeners putting together their teams. It was really fun. First thing that stood out to me, Jamey, was Travis Kelce going 5th overall. It was McCaffrey, Cook, Kamara, Henry, and then Kelce 5th overall in a half PPR league. What did you think?
I thought, look, as we've talked about quite a bit, if you want to get the biggest difference maker at a thin position, you're going to have to pull a trigger at some point in the first round. And, 5th overall is a little too soon for me. But obviously the fantasy manager who drafted him was not going to get him in round 2. So, as we said during the course of the show, the first 4 running backs I think are going to be locked in. McCaffrey, Cook, Kamara, Henry. Then it's that next trio of Zeke, Barkley, and Taylor that's polarizing. And so if you don't want to deal with that headache of what Zeke may or may not be with everybody coming back, what Barkley may or may not look like with, now that he's healthy, what Taylor may or may not do in his sophomore season, then take a guy that is tried and true, and he's going to give you amazing production as long as he stays healthy, and you take Kelce. So I don't like it, but I can see why the fantasy manager did it.
Let's go to pick 31. This was an area that we noted during the draft where it just seemed like the end of a running back and wide receiver tier. Pick 30 was Terry McLaurin. Pick 31 was J.K. Dobbins. The next wide receivers off the board were Allen Robinson and Cooper Kupp. The next running backs off the board were Chris Carson and David Montgomery. This was an important part of the middle of the 3rd round. All 3 tight ends are gone. And we may have run out of the running backs and wide receivers with truly elite upside, Jamey. So what do you make of that? How should fantasy owners approach drafts knowing these tiers? And at that point, by the way, no quarterbacks were off the board. So that could affect people's drafts too.
Right, and only the first 3 tight ends. So as we've seen, we did a draft where Kyle Pitts was taken in the 3rd round. Obviously, the quarterbacks are going to typically go at least the top 3 to 5 guys in potentially the first 3 rounds. So I just think that, you have to understand what you're getting. And so if you want to get one of the top tier running backs or receivers, you have to probably pull the trigger in the first 2 rounds and maybe not take Kittle or Waller if that concerns you, if you are not in the tight end camp of having to get one of those guys. But if you miss on them, this is where we talk about the running back dead zone. The receivers are going to be amazing still. So we say there's a drop off in the tier. Oh no, I didn't get Terry McLaurin, so I got to settle for Allen Robinson. That's the consolation prize. And clearly Robinson's production has been awesome. I got to take one of the Cowboys guys, or I have to take one of the Bucks guys. You're not getting bad players at that position. It's really the running backs. And so once you get past, Dobbins, then the next group of guys, it's Carson, it's Sanders, it's Jacobs, it's Montgomery, it's Gaskin, Davis, Etienne. They're not bad players, but this is where you kind of see there's a little bit more flaws following that first group, or at least the end of that first group. So you just have to, know what you're dealing with here. And that's why for me, as you'll see, I did something a little different. I took Patrick Mahomes as the first quarterback off the board because I didn't love the value of the players at running back and receiver, knowing what I had to already start my team with Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones.
35th overall is when he took Mahomes. So he goes late in round 3. The next quarterback was Josh Allen, middle of round 5. Lamar Jackson in round 5. Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert in round 6. 5 more quarterbacks in round 7. So what did you think of the way quarterbacks were drafted?
Yeah, so this is the regret you have when you take a quarterback first, and so you take Mahomes and at the end of round 3, and then you see that Dak Prescott goes to you at the beginning of round 7. You're like, oh bleep, what did I just do? And another interesting discussion that we had was you taking Jalen Hurts, who I love, as a second quarterback in round 10. And so obviously there's a gap.
Round 11.
There's a gap between Mahomes and Prescott. There's a huge gap between Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. But what could you have done differently with your team if you had done something? What could I have done differently with my team if I had done something different? So those are the questions you end up asking yourself if you do take a quarterback early, and then you see the value go as it sort of cascaded down, through the Prescott pick mostly, but then through some of the other quarterback picks as the draft unfolded. So I thought when I took Mahomes, I probably would have expected to see the next 4 quarterbacks that we typically say in the top 5 go in round 4. The fact that, everybody else in the draft was able to play it out another round after that shows you that we drafted with some smart people, and I was probably the fool for taking Mahomes too soon.
Nah, he's still Mahomes. All right, Jamey actually ended up with a great team. He just didn't take a tight end until his last pick, so you can listen to see how it played out on Fantasy Football Today. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Football Today in 5. For Jamey Eisenberg, I'm Adam Azer. We'll talk to you tomorrow.